approval on what I can bear and puts it in the outbox. God will never give us, He promises more than we can bear. But sometimes He brings us to the limit, to our max. Doesn't He? Some of you may be there this morning. Man, I know your needs and I know your burdens. And some of you may say, God, I'm at my max. Sometimes God allows troubles and trials to come to test our mettle, to test our strength, and bring us almost to the breaking point. He said, my grace is sufficient for thee. For then He said, listen to what it says. He says, I have lost my way. My strength, listen to this, is made perfect in weakness. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities. God, thank you for my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Philippians 3:10 says that I may know Him and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His suffering. How many of you want to know the power of God's resurrection? Huh? You want to know the power of God's resurrection? And the fellowship of His suffering? Being made conformable unto His death? Why did He have to finish that sentence like that? I want to know the power of God. I want to know the power of God's resurrection. And the fellowship of His suffering. Being made conformable unto His death. Which brings me to my last point. Sometimes suffering is in participation with Christ. Romans 8:17 says, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. Woohoo! Hallelujah! I'm a joint heir with Jesus. If so be that ye suffer with Him. Oh, I didn't see that part. That we may be also glorified together. First Corinthians 4:11 says, for we which live are always delivered unto death for Jesus' sake, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our mortal flesh. That the life of Jesus may be manifest in our mortal flesh. What in the world does that mean? It means so that we can be more like Jesus. That's what I said last week. To be more like Jesus. I said, I'm trying to make you more like me. I'm trying to manifest Jesus in your mortal flesh. Jeremiah said God was talking to me one day and He made me go down. He asked me to go down to the potter's house. And He said, I'll speak to you there. He said, I was watching the potter as he was turning the wheel. He had a lump of clay. And can I say something this morning? God always starts with a lump of clay. How many of you are a lump of clay? God, you know, if you ever think of yourself more highly, just realize you're a lump of clay. What did God do? He took some dirt. God took some dirt and He spit on it. Oh, it's so easy for us to think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. God starts with a lump of clay. And And then as that wheel begins to go around, he begins to form it and shape it. And we like that part. God's making a vessel of honor. We like that part. But sometimes in that clay are imperfections. Anybody know anything about that? There are imperfections. And as God begins to dig those imperfections out, or maybe even start over, God says, I'm doing a work in you. Anybody feel like God may be working in you right now? Anybody like that? Anybody? Can I ask you this morning, would it be too much for us to ask God, would you keep working in my life? Would you keep working in my life? Would you test me and try me and prove me? To see, David said it this way, Lord, open me up and see if there's any wicked way in me. And can I tell you, as a country, as a nation, we need this. But as a church, we need this. And as individuals, I need this. Lord, would you continue doing a work in me? What does that mean? He's making a vessel of honor. He's making something that he can use. That means suffering. That means digging out the stuff that's not supposed to be there. That means sometimes going over and starting over and smashing my desire, smashing my dream, and starting all over again. And he says, I'm working to make a vessel of honor. Can I tell you something? The vessel of honor was not supposed to be used to put up on a shelf somewhere and admire. God's not doing this so he can pat us on the back and say, look what I've done. Look what I've made. I made me a Darrin Highfill. No. Sure. You know why he did it? So he could use us, so we could be poured out. So God could use us in the fashion in which he created us, and he wanted us to be conformed to his image, the Word of God says. To be more like Jesus. If I were to ask you this morning, how many of you want to be more like Jesus tomorrow than you were today? We'd all raise our hand, wouldn't we? But we're also somewhat afraid of what that means. Aren't we? I said this last week. I love ice cream. I love it. Cheeseburgers? I had one this week. Anybody else have cheeseburgers this week? You like cheeseburgers? Yeah. It's always the bad stuff for you that tastes the best. That's what we like. What do you not like?
Broccoli. Brussels sprouts.
You don't like Brussels sprouts? Kale. I hate kale.
Oh, it's good.
Why did God even ever make kale? That was a mistake, God. Sorry. That's one. That's it. But it's good for you. So they call it roughage. Yeah. It's good for you. Hey, whatever God is doing in your life right now, it's good for you. Oh, but Darrin, it's painful. I don't like it. It hurts. But it's good for you. Sometimes God doesn't. You got to check your heart first of all and say, God, is there something that I'm doing that's causing chastisement? Ask yourself that. Maybe it's a ministry. Maybe God is using you and your life as a ministry to help others. Sometimes He does that. Sometimes He's testing us to prove us. And it's always in fellowship with Jesus Christ. You want to be more like Jesus? Then walk with Him a while. How many of you have had friends, and after you've had friends long enough, you begin to talk sometimes, you bring in some of their jargon and lingo into your life? You know what I'm talking about? Anybody know what I'm talking about like that? You start talking like them? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You walk and talk with Jesus for a little while. What does that mean? Being made conformable unto His death. I want to know the power of the resurrection. I used to pray that. And the fellowship of His suffering. I'm done with the sermon. Would you bow your head and close your eyes this morning? I said it last week. And I'll say it one more time just to tie it together. God is doing a work